Greetings, fellow humans. I'm MartianBuu. Today I'm going to talk about the cards from the upcoming core set, which is the classic/basic rework coming out imminently. For the sake of brevity, I'm going to speed through the cards that are not being changed or have always been in the classic and basic set, unless I have a strong opinion about them. This is largely going to be from a wild perspective because I stream wild. But I do play standard off stream, so if I have an opinion on it, I will make that known. Battle Friend, iconic Demon Hunter card, as with Crimson Sigil Runner. Chaos Strike is gaining the Fel spell tag. They didn't include any cards in the core set where spell school matters, so we don't know how much the fact that this is a Fel spell or how much any of the new spells that have a tag is going to matter. But maybe once the Barons is released, it will, and it will be relevant. Feast of Souls is now a shadow spell. Kervas Bloodthern, 2 mana 2/2 charge lifesteal. After you play a card with Outcast, return this to your hand. So this is kind of like an expensive pen flinger in some respects. Instead of it being any spell, it has to be an Outcast card, which is a little bit more restrictive. A lot of people see charge lifesteal and the potential to chain this like Penflinger and think it's going to be busted, but I don't know. It seems like a solid card. Maybe 2 mana 2/2 charge lifesteal alone is enough to warrant seeing play. But I don't know how much better this is than Penflinger in most cases. So I think it's going to be a good card in the right spot, but is not going to be a monster. Sightless Watcher, Spectral Sight, Eldrazi Warblades. I do think that like Eldrazi Warblades might be a design space restricting card. I feel like it's caused a lot of problems in the past year. It's been fun, like I don't want it gone by any means, but I almost feel like this is a card you could have rotated. Coordinated Strike. I-Beam is now a Fel spell. So Gan'ary Glaivesmith, 3 mana 3/2. Give your hero +3 attack this turn if cast from the Outcast position. It is a demon. This is slotting right into Odd Demon Hunter, which is getting its Warglaves back asterisk. So this could be super relevant, especially with Warglaves back. This is good just on curve or on 4 in Odd Demon Hunter. So you play this in its Outcast position for 3, and then you hero power, and you're dealing 5 damage and developing a 3/2. I don't think the demon tag is going to matter a lot most of the time, but Illidari Studies is a pretty good card that gets played in at least the current versions of Odd Demon Hunter. And you could discover Philosophy off of that, which would copy this and give you a little bit of extra burst randomly. Solid card is probably going to get played in every aggressive Demon Hunter deck, even in Standard. Ashtung Battlelord, Raging Fellscreamer. Chaos Nova is going to be a Fel spell. Warglaves of Auzinoth, so 5 mana 3/3 now. It's cool that Odd Demon Hunter gets this card back because that version of Odd Demon Hunter, the mid-range one that had this and Priestess in it, like that was a really fun deck. That was more fun than the current iterations of Odd Demon Hunter for sure, for me anyways. The durability loss is going to matter. I don't know that it's going to matter enough to kill this card for Odd Demon Hunter or to have this card not bring back Odd Demon Hunter, but it is significant. Like it's going to be a noticeably worse card for not having 4 durability. But it's still cool. Like I'd much rather have Odd Demon Hunter be able to play this card with 3 durability than have it not be able to play this card with 4. So it's sweet. I'm excited to try out last year's Odd Demon Hunter again. Illidari Inquisitor, 8 mana 8/8 demon, rush. After your hero attacks an enemy, this attacks it too. So what you do with this is you play a weapon on the turn prior, and then you have this hit your opponent's taunt on 8, attack your opponent in the face with your weapon, and then this will hit your opponent in the face. So it's like It's like King Crush a turn earlier. This card's nuts, right? Like, I don't know that it's going to be wild relevant for a while unless there's some combo that's easy to do, and then like Reno Demon Hunter could use this or something. But this card's sweet. I think this card is going to be busted. Like, any card that costs 8 and requires like setup, you have to wonder if it's actually that good. But this thing has charge. Worst case scenario, if you don't have a weapon out, you can still do this on 9. And then you're dealing 9 damage to base. I don't know. This card seems really, really strong to me, and I imagine it finding homes somewhere. On to Druid, we have Innervate, surprising no one. It is now a nature spell. Pounce is returning from Wild. Enchanted Raven is returning from Wild. Mark of the Wild is now a nature spell, and it has an additional health on it. So it's now a 2-mana 2/3 with Taunt, which, if it were a minion, would be good stats for cost. Not that that would necessarily warrant a spot in your deck, but if you have a minion out from turn 1, those stats also effectively have charge. I don't know if this is good enough to make it into like aggro Druid in Wilds, but it might be. It still seems a little bit slow, and like Wild has so many cards now that buff the board wide, which is more what that deck is looking for, that I would be surprised if this card makes the cut. But Standard might actually see this card, see some play now, because it is much better than it was with 1 less health. Power of the Wild. Feral Rage returning from Wild. The Corrupted card is very similar to this, but this gives you the option and doesn't require you to corrupt it, and gives you 2 more armor. If there's a slow Druid, I could see it possibly playing this card, but my guess would be no. Landscaping coming back. It is now a nature spell. Cool. Wild Growth is still in Standard. Iconic Druid spell is now a nature spell. Nordrassil Druid, 4 mana 3/5 minion. Battlecry, the next spell you cast this turn costs 3 less. This card is pretty good stats for cost, and it has a really good effect. You could do like Mark of the Wild with this on 4, and then you have a 5/8 taunt, which is pretty strong. Yeah, I think that like a 4 mana 3/5 that then lets you cheat 3 mana is pretty solid. I'd be surprised if this doesn't find a home somewhere. Soul of the Forest is now a nature spell. Druid of the Claw. So it's becoming a 5/4 instead of a 4/4. And its taunt mode is going to be a 5/6. But its charge mode is now rush mode. Has 1 more attack. I'm not mourning this card like I'm mourning some cards that we're going to see later on in the set. As far as losing its charge, just because this card has seen exactly this much play since like Nexramus. But it does kind of just feel like a bad card now. You know, like it's a 5 mana 5/6, which is decent with taunts. And the fact that you can, in a pinch, go with rush mode and have like a bad rush card when that's more valuable than your taunt mode is cool. But like, are you ever going to elect to put this in your deck? I would imagine not. Certainly not in Wild. Again, like we're not missing out on anything. This card wasn't playable in its old form, but I thought like it being able to sneak a lethal was part of what made it cool. Force of Nature is now a nature spell. I'm surprised that they didn't rotate this one. I feel like this one would have been a good candidate to rotate with the classic rework and unnerf to let people play Force of Nature Savage Roar again, especially considering that they're planning to do a bunch of other unnerfs. And as broken as Force of Nature Savage Roar was back in the day, a 9 mana deal 14 damage combo is not that. It's not going to be oppressively strong in Wild by today's standards, so we could have gotten this back. But Druid cares about treants, Druid cares about going wide, so I see why this version of the card would make the cut as long as they're not going to rotate it and unnerf it. Menagerie Warden is returning from Wild at 1 less mana cost and -1/-1 stats. So on paper, this card is more playable, right? Because it costs 1 less. But what are the good beasts in Druid? The good beasts in Druid are Twilight Runner and like Thresher. So you can't curve those with this, right? Like, I mean, you can. You can play one of those on 5 and then play this on 6, but then don't you value the +1/+1 stats? If they print some good 4 mana beasts that you could curve this from, then I think that this card will probably see some play in Standard. I don't see it seeing any more play in Wild than it used to. Nourish is now a nature spell. Ancient of War is probably going to see even less play in Standard now because Zephrys is going away, and that's the only reason you would ever play this card. So, there you go. Cenarius is having its mana reduced by 1. That's pretty cool, I think. I think that Cenarius has been overcosted for quite some time, so having its mana reduced by 1 makes it a little bit more playable. I don't know what Wild Druid deck would play this. I'm sure that at 8 mana, something in Standard can find a place for this, but Wild, I don't know, because Wild is like OTK or aggro, pretty much, for Druid. And I don't see like Jades wanting this necessarily, so I don't imagine this will see much more play in Wild unless you're like excited to play it at a reduced mana cost, but I think it's really cool that they're revisiting some of these old, outdated cards and making them a bit more playable. On to Hunter. Arcane Shot gains the Arcane tag. Lock and Load is returning from Wild at half the mana cost. I think that the buff that this card needed was, instead of whenever you play a spell, add a random Hunter card to your hand, instead have it be whenever you play a spell, add a random Hunter spell to your hand. That way, if you have spells, you can chain them more easily because you're always getting Hunter spells. That kind of turns this into a yucky evocation, which I don't necessarily love. But I'm not sure how much more play this is going to see. People might play some like Yogg and Load Hunters in Standard now that they have a new Yogg and now that they have this card back. But most of the time, that Yogg doesn't care how many spells you play too much, so we'll see. I'm sure a lot of people are going to have a lot of fun with this. I don't know that it's a competitive card, even at half the mana. Tracking. So a lot of people are pretty excited about this. It is now, instead of like look at 3 cards, pick 1, and discard the other 2, it's now just discover a card from your deck. This is pretty good if you care about all 30 of your cards and you're gonna play all 30 of your cards, which is usually not true for Hunter. This card is much better off of Zul'jin than the other tracking was, but largely the old tracking was actually a bonus that you would discard the cards. It's usually good because you don't need every card in your deck against every matchup, and you don't need every card in your deck at every stage of the game. So you would pick the card that you needed right now and let the 2 cards that you probably don't need anymore or wouldn't need in this matchup at all go to what is effectively the bottom of your deck if you're not going to actually draw the whole thing. And now you've kind of thinned your deck a bit. You're more likely to draw a card that you actually want again because it discarded those extra 2 cards. So not in every situation, but in a lot of situations, this card is actually worse now. I certainly think it's less interesting. It's now just a really good discover card instead of being, what tracking was before as a way to like power through your deck super fast. So I think it's kind of a shame, but if you like playing with Zul'jin and you weren't including tracking, or if you were just like, you can't wrap your mind around the fact that those discarding the 2 cards off of tracking is effectively the same as putting them on the bottom of your deck, then this is a cool change for you. So get stoked. Webspinner is returning from Wild. Explosive Trap is now a fire spell. Freezing Trap is now a frost spell. Headhunter's Hatchet is returning. It's cool that this is coming alongside Webspinner, so you can play Webspinner on 1, and then you have a 2-mana 2/3 on 2. I imagine that aggressive Hunter decks might run both. Although the fact that we don't have kill command in core set anymore makes me think that like having cheap beasts like Webspinner is not going to matter as much as it used to. And having a cheap weapon like this is not going to matter as much as it used to. So maybe kill command doesn't work to rotate, but we have no idea what they're coming out with soon. So it could be that Face Hunter gets other support and other Beast Matter support, and we see some early aggressive Beast Hunter. Quick Shot. I'm a little surprised that they brought this back. It feels like a pretty aggressive card to bring back to standard, but they also rotated kill commands, so this is kind of filling those shoes. Solid card for a Face Hunter. It's usually just 2 mana, deal 3 damage, and with the upside of if you do run out of cards, which Aggro Hunter often does, at least by some point, you get to draw another one, and that's really handy. Scavenging Hyena remains. Selective Breeder, 2 mana, 1/1, discover a copy of a beast in your deck. So this is like cheaper Stitch Tracker if you only want to care about beasts. This card is bad tempo. So if you're running a tempo beast deck, you do not want this card, I don't think. A 2 mana 1/1 so that you can play a beast right after doesn't seem good to me. So this would go in like a combo beast deck, I would imagine. And those do exist. There are decks in Wild that use cards like Knuckles and then hand buff them a bunch and copy them while they're in your hand, and then stuff like that. So like tutoring the beast is really important for those decks, but you already have Scavenger's Ingenuity, which not only tutors it but also buffs it up. So I don't think you need this card in those decks. I'm having a hard time seeing where this would see any play at all, but maybe in a really slow Reno Hunter, you could have the see play. Snake Trap. Bear Shark returning from Wild. No Houndmaster, so I don't know if this will see play, but if Houndmaster had been around, you could curve. Deadly Shot remaining. Dire Frenzy. So they destroyed Stone Tusk Boar, which is like the card to play with this. I don't know how much play this is going to see, because like buffing a rushing Stone Tusk Boar and shuffling a bunch of those into your deck doesn't matter too much. I wonder if they're printing more toys for this. I don't know that it'll see any play in Standard, but it's cool that they're bringing it back. Savannah Highmane is remaining and also not seeing a buff or anything. It'll probably see about as much play as it does already. King Crush remaining unchanged. On to Mage. So they've decided that Mage's identity is going to be developing a bunch of random stuff. And Babbling Book is like the OG Mage develop random stuff or generate random stuff card. So it makes sense that they bring that back. Shooting Star returns as an arcane spell. Snap Freeze is coming back with half the mana. This tickles me because when it was printed, it was already a strictly better Shatter. And now it's just like power creeping Shatter out the wazoo, you know? Like, this card is nuts compared to Shatter. Is it nuts compared to other cards, though? Probably not. Maybe if Ray of Frost was still going to be around in Standard, it would see some play there. This makes maybe Mechathune decks in Wild in Mage a little bit easier. It's still like Mechathune Mage in Wild is a bit of a meme, but this will improve that. So you can now like Incanter's Flow while this is in your deck, and then like, you know, freeze your Mechathune and then snap freeze your Mechathune. This will be a great card to discover if you discover some freeze stuff. They took a lot of the freeze away from Classic and Basic, or from the core set. So we're going to be relying on the Year of the Griffin expansions to produce some freeze cards for this to see play. Arcanologist is returning from Wild. This is a very strong secret card, even in Wild today. And that list is tight now. If Secret Mage is a thing in Standard, this card will be in it. Fallen Hero, this and Koldara Drake are returning from Wild. It makes me think that they're going to do... It makes me think that Mage is going to have a Hero Power Matters theme throughout the year. Just in a vacuum right now, I don't see this mattering in Standard, but we still haven't seen most of the Year of the Griffin cards, so maybe. Arcane Intellect is now an arcane spell. Cone of Cold is having its mana reduced by 1. So Frost Nova is leaving Standard. Cone of Cold, I think a lot of the time, is as good as Frost Nova. Especially like on 5 with Doomsayer, which is also leaving Standard. I can't think of a deck in Wild that wants to run 2 copies of Frost Nova and 2 copies of budget Frost Nova, but maybe. We'll see. Counterspel is now an arcane spell. This is a card that I think is pretty yucky. I would have liked to see it rotated to Wild and nerfed. I think that this is the card that makes Wild Secret Mage as frustrating to play against it as it is. There are a lot of like powerful cards in Secret Mage, and if you nerf one of those, you know, when it's powerful again in the future, you still have to play against Counterspell, so that's kind of my thought process on it. I would have liked to see this card change so that it refunds the mana when it counters something, just because I don't think this is a fun card to play against, and I don't even think it's particularly fun to play with. At least not in the same way that a counter is fun in MTG, so I'm a little sad to see this remain in Standard, and a little sad to see it remain unchanged. Ice Barrier is now a Frost spell. Mirror Entity is now an arcane spell. Fireball is now a fire spell. Water Elemental is unchanged. Aegwynn the Guardian. So this is Medivh's mom, and she's got like some strong flavor. 5 mana, 5/5, spell damage +2, death rattle. The next minion you draw inherits these powers. So like the Guardian passes down their powers to the next Guardian. That's kind of their shtick. So you play this on 5, it dies, and then you top deck your Babbling Book, and now your Babbling Book is 1 mana +2 spell damage. I'm not sure how strong this card is, but it's really interesting. I don't know that Spell Damage Mage wants a card this slow. I don't know that Wild could use this unless there's going to be some kind of N'Zoth shenanigans. But it's a really interesting card, and I'm excited to play with it. I like that. I like cards that are relevant to WoW lore and have strong flavor in their mechanics, like this card does. So I think that that's a win for this one. Ethereal Conjurer is returning to Standard with 1 more health. 5 mana, 6/4, discover a spell. This card saw some play back in the day, but cards were weaker and the pool was shallower back then, so we'll see. Standard is going to lose a lot of cards right away, but you're going to have the mini sets to make up for that as we go along. Maybe this sees a lot of play up front and then sees progressively less as the year goes on. Because a 5 mana 6/4 is pretty mediocre tempo, and discovering a spell is something you can do for almost nothing in Mage these days. So we'll see if this sees play. Koldara Drake is returning from Wild to Standard with 1 more health. I think that the price of this card was the limiting factor, not the stats on it. Because if you play it on 10, you hero power twice, who cares? If you play it on curve, you can at most hero power 3 times. But they brought back Fallen Hero as well, which makes me think that they have hero power matters for Mage cards planned at least at some point in the next year. So I guess look forward to that. And if you were a fan of Koldara Drake before, you can look forward to some increased play. They said that they're going to unnerf a lot of cards in Wild, and I think Dragoncaster has to make the cut if they're unnerfing most things, which is something Ixar said. So even Mage, prior to the Dragoncaster nerf, was seeing some fringe play. It felt half decent. You would run it with like Spiteful Summoner, a Dragon package, and then Power of Creation and some other like expensive Mage spells, whatever fit your fancy. It wasn't like a high tier deck by any means, but it was something. So If we get that card back, then this card being slightly better helps, because it was played in that deck, you know. If you play this on 10 in that deck, you get to hero power 4 times, which is, you know, twice as good. But yeah, it's cool that it's getting 1 more health. Flame Strike is now a fire spell, and it deals 5 damage instead of 4. The difference between dealing 4 damage and dealing 5 damage is enormous. I think that's like, you know, it's by 1, but I think going from 4 damage to 5 means that you're killing most things instead of just a lot of things with Flame Strike. I think this spell is significantly better. We'll probably see play in a slow standard deck, but is it good enough in wild? I don't know, because slow mage decks in wild are LPG decks. So Luna's Pocket Galaxy, and Luna's Pocket Galaxy wants you to play minions and not spells so that you cheat a lot of mana. So running an expensive spell like this doesn't always make the cut, but this is a lot better than it used to be, so maybe it does now. And maybe it does if we get some good Fire Spells Matter cards. On to Paladin. Avenge is coming back. This card was really strong when it was in Standard, and I imagine it will be really strong in Standard again. It is now a holy spell, if that matters. Noble Sacrifice is hanging around. So, like, Noble Sacrifice is like you're sacrificing yourself, you know, like that's an honorable thing to do. And then, like, I'm assuming that Avenge is like holy vengeance, you know. It's still like they're both motivations, you know, like why is this spell holy and Noble Sacrifice isn't? That's what I want to know. But yeah, Noble Sacrifice will see as much play as it does. Reckoning is a new spell, also holy. Secret, after an enemy minion deals 3 more damage, destroy it. I think this card is really interesting. I don't know that it would go in an odd deck, which is kind of the only Paladin deck that's running secrets right now in Wild, because they have Omayog and Never Surrender in there already, just protecting the wide board, and this seems very defensive to me. So this is like a better Vaporize, right? Because you can't play around it by like hitting your opponent with patches or something to have that get destroyed by the Vaporize, because this requires you deal 3 damage with it. So it only kills significant targets, which I think matters a lot for something like this. It's not just your enemy's face, though. So if your opponent has like a big rush card that they were going to value trade or something like that, you still get that too. So it's going to be interesting. I imagine a like mid-rangey or a control paladin that cares about secrets might run this. Righteous Protector is returning from Wild. This is a really strong card in Wild. Like every paladin deck that can run it runs it. So I'm surprised they would bring this back, but Argent Protector has 1 more attack now. The fact that this is good stats for cost and gives something else Divine Shield makes me think that maybe some kind of tempo-y paladin might run it, at least in Standard. This isn't odd costed, right? So it's not going to see much play in Wild unless there's a lot of like even support or something like that. But it is better, so maybe it'll see play somewhere sometime. Holy Light is a holy spell and now heals your hero for 8 instead of 6. This is still like an entire card to just heal for 8 and only to your hero. So I don't think you elect to put this in your deck unless you're running... I can't even think of anything, you know, like... I think Paladin would have to be pretty desperate for healing to elect to use one of their precious slots for this card, but we'll see. Pursuit of Justice, 2 mana, +1 attack to Silverhand recruits. You summon this game, holy spell. This is really interesting. This is like Paladin's take on Incanter's Flow. Instead of buffing your spells by 1 mana, it's buffing your recruits from then on. So if you have it like on curve, your recruits are much better throughout the game. I don't know that this is enough to make even Paladin happen in Wild, especially because it's 2 mana do nothing. You know, like if this buffed the recruits you already had on the board and then the ones that you played in the future, it would be a really good card, and I imagine it would get played, but this seems like the Thraxian without a body almost, you know, so it might be really cool. I think that Dude Paladin is getting enough to be something in Standard. You know, you already have the Balloon Vendor and whatnot. We might see some Carnival Barker Dude Paladin with Pursuit of Justice in Standard in the coming year. Aldor Peacekeeper. Equality is not getting unnerfed, but it is getting buffed. So originally this cost 2, then it was nerfed to 4. It was amazing at 2, and it was garbage at 4. And now it's at 3. So is that the sweet spot? It's a lot better. Wild Pyromancer equality on 5 is a lot better than Wild Pyromancer equality on 6. But I don't know that a 1 mana buff to equality is enough to make this card relevant again. The big thing about this card to me is even Paladin used to play this at 2. Even Paladin makes a lot of 1 attack guys, and so having a 2 mana change all of your opponent's minions into something that has 1 health was really good for tradesies. Allows you to take control of the board and push through big taunts pretty easily in a deck that generates a bunch of tokens. Odd Paladin generates way more tokens than even Paladin did. Odd Paladin does have access to Barov and Libram of Justice right now, and it sometimes runs those as text. You know, Barov more often than Libram of Justice now that Barov's come out. But while Barov develops a 3/2 alongside this effect, it also nukes your board once it goes down. So if you play your Barov, trade your guys in, and then like hero power, and they kill your Barov, your guys go with it. It'll be interesting to see if Odd Paladin starts teching 1 or 2 of these in, depending on the meta, so that it can trade into giants or get through taunters more easily, now that it can run a version of this card that doesn't destroy their own board or cost way too much. Warhorse Trainer, surprisingly, is getting 1 more attack in addition to being brought back to a Standard. This card is in the best version of Odd Paladin. Before I found out that this card was getting buffed, Raid Leader I found out was getting buffed. It's getting +1 health. And I was thinking, you know, is 1 more health on the Warhorse Trainer worth running it over Raid Leader now that Raid Leader has 1 more health? So the reason that Warhorse Trainer is better over Raid Leader is because it had 2 more health, even though it doesn't hit your non-recruit things for the +1 attack. But having War Leader at +1 health is like almost competing with Warhorse Trainer on stats for the card itself, but it is also giving like your Righteous Protector, your Broom, your Tour Guide +1 attack in addition to just your recruits. And then I found out that this thing's getting 1 more attack, so now this is just a good minion, you know? Like, it was a decent minion on its own before, but now it's good stats for cost, right? And then it also buffs your recruits. So this is going to be even better than it is in Wild right now, and it is already really good in Wild. This was not good enough to make the cut in Silverhand recruit decks in the Standard of its day. So I guess that was the thought process behind giving it 1 more attack. But Dude Paladin's got a lot of support in both Darkmoon Faire and in this core set. So I imagine they want that deck to be a thing in Standard, and if it is, I'll be playing it because I love Dude Paladin, and that's like the biggest shame of Odd Paladin. It's made Dude Paladin obsolete in Wild, so it'll be sweet to have a place to play it. Blessing of Kings is now a holy spell. Consecration is now a holy spell. True Silver Champion is unchanged. Stand Against Darkness returning from Wild. I think that Day at the Fair is better than this, but maybe if dudes matter enough, you run both. Guardian of Kings now has Taunt in addition to a little bit more stats. A slow paladin might like this. I don't know about Wild, but 7 mana 5/7 Taunt, restore 6 health to your hero is pretty good defensively if your meta is slow enough. 7 mana, right now Paladin has access to like Libram of Hope, so that often costs 6 really easily and heals you for 8 and develops an 8/8 to haunt Divine Shield. So Guardian of Kings, even in this form, has a lot of competition, but we'll see, especially if they print some more Highlander support this year, which I don't expect them to do, but you could see the right Paladin deck valuing this card. Tyrion Fjordring returning. All right, on to Priest, Crimson Clergy. So this is very similar to Light Warden, except it's only friendly characters. It's not anytime anything gets healed. More importantly, though, it has 1 more health. In general, 1 mana, 1/3 archetype enablers tend to enable that archetype. But we don't have Circle of Healing in Standard anymore, so I don't know what they're going to do with that. Also, like, Wild Pyromancer isn't around in Standard anymore. So I don't know what you combo this with, but we'll see what the Barons has and what the rest of the year has. Is this Light Warden, Gift of the Naru enough to be like a Wild Pyromancer, Circle of Healing deck in the spirit of Frothing Berserker OTK? I don't know. Probably not, but it's a cool card. It might see play in the right Priest deck if there's a tempo-y thing available. Flash Heal is returning from Wild as a holy spell. We had Budget Flash Heal for a while in Standard, and that saw no play. This card has seen the most play in combination with Auchenai. There is no Auchenai currently in Standard, so I don't think that this will see much play, but it will be slightly more handy to discover randomly than the Budget Flash Heal was last year. Focused Will. So they're bringing back Humongous Razorleaf from Wild and also rotating Ancient Watcher. And then printing Silence Priest support. Why did they rotate Ancient Watcher? I don't know. Like, it would have been cool to play this in Humongous Razorleaf and Focused Will. We'll see what other minions they have. So this is 1 mana, silence a minion, then give it 3 health. This is like only usable in a Silence Priest deck. So like you have to care about silencing your own stuff for this to matter. It is a cool spell. We'll see if Silence Priest gets some more support than this. But Wild will certainly make good use of this. It's probably not going to be enough to like bring Silence Priest to the forefront of the meta, but if you are a Silence Priest enthusiast, this is a solid card for that. Holy Smite returning as a holy spell. Psychie Conjurer is sticking around. Coltyrian Chaplain sticking around. Shadow Word Death is staying in Standard as a shadow spell. Surprising that his friend Shadow Word Pain is not going to be around. Shadowform is coming back from Wild as a shadow spell and at 1 less mana cost. I don't know that this still... Like, the old version of this card, when you played the second one, it would upgrade the damage further to 3. This doesn't say that on the card anymore. So what would be cool about this card is if they, in the next year, print a bunch of cards where Shadowform matters. And this would be like the basic way to go into Shadowform, and then you could print cards that like put you in Shadowform for a turn or something, and like came with bodies or did something else. I don't know. I don't know that you're gonna run a 2 mana do nothing card that all it does is change your hero power to deal 2 from heal 2. Not in the Standard of these days, but it's cool that they're bringing it back. It's cool that they're reducing the mana cost on it. Shadowform is pretty iconic for priests, so it was a bummer not to have it before, even though it was seeing exactly no play. Thrive in the Shadows. 2 mana, discover a spell from your deck. Shadow spell. You may think that is just Shadow Visions, but it is not quite. Shadow Visions discovers a copy, and this discovers the spell itself. So if you care about value, Shadow Visions is better, and if you care about draw, then this card is better. Most Wild decks that care about one care about the other. So this is like essentially 2 more copies of Shadow Visions for Big Priest. You are going to see Palm Reading into Shadow Visions on 5. this much more often than you were already, which was pretty often. So, huge Big Priest buff. I imagine Raza plays this card too. Lightspawn is 3 mana now and 1 less health. It is now a 3 mana 4/4 instead of a 4 mana 5/5 that is really easy to trade into. I can't imagine this will see more play than it already does. Shadowed Spirit, 3 mana 4/3, Death Rattle, deal 3 damage to the enemy hero. This card's interesting. I don't know that Smork Priest is ever going to be a thing, really, because it has the same problem that like Hunter has with being a control deck. Their hero power is pointless. You know, like the hero power for Hunter is deal 2 damage to your opponent's face, and if you're trying to control the board, you basically don't have a hero power, because you don't care about dealing damage to them now. You care about dealing damage to them later, like in Fatigue if you're a control deck. So I don't know about this for Priest. You know, like dealing damage to your opponent's face, like just conflicts with your hero power. So if this was like better costed and also hit you, then you have a reason to use your hero power because you're dealing damage to yourself. This would be interesting if you could make it work with N'Zoth to like bring a bunch of these back and then pressure your opponent with it, and if they kill it, they take a bunch of damage in a Priest deck. But I don't see a deck like that appearing in Wild as long as Raza Priest is around. It just seems like a slower, less powerful version of that. Holy Nova returning as a holy spell. Power Infusion returning as a holy spell. Shadow Word Ruin returning as a shadow spell. Tempo Enforcer returning as Tempo Enforcer. Natalie Celine is sticking around. On to Rogue. Backstab is returning. So some people have pointed out, like, it's weird that some spells don't have a spell school, but like, this is a spell to the game. In practice, it's just stabbing somebody, you know, like it's not actually a spell. It doesn't need a spell school. This is an action more than anything else. So I think it's fine that not every spell in the game has a spell tag. Preparation is returning unnerfed. This is another card that I would have liked to see rotated and unnerfed, but I could see why they wouldn't do that. It's already still a good card when it only reduces 2, so there you go. Shadow Step, I feel like, is a card that causes problems in Standard, so I'm surprised that they would leave it around, but there you go. Bladed Cultist returning. This never saw play in the Standard of its day, and I don't imagine it'll see more now. Deadly Poison is now a nature spell. So much like Backstab, this is also not a spell. This is, again, an action, but you have to like grind herbs up and stuff to make your poison, I guess, is the thematics here. So it's a nature spell. I'm hoping that they print a way for nature spells to matter that Rogue can use, and this isn't just kind of a random flavor fail, but we'll see. Sinister Strike. Swashbuckler coming back to Standard, slightly adjusted. So 1 mana 1/1, add a random card from another class to your hand, Pirate. This used to just go from your opponent's class, and now it goes from another class. The reason that they've transitioned from opponent's class to another class for Rogue is because if you have a take cards from your opponent's class payoff card like Tess, it's always like spells from other classes. And they word it that way so that in the Rogue mirror, like, you don't just get a bunch of value just because all of your cards are Rogue cards. So instead of it just being play all the cards you play this game from your opponent's class, being a omega high roll against Rogue, instead they made it pointless against Rogue. So like, you're not going to be able to generate cards that Tess Greymane could use with cards like Swashbuckler that are generating Rogue spells that are your class. So they've shifted away from that to cards from another class for that type of reason. And so this has just been updated to reflect that philosophy change. So if they're going to print some more Thief payoff cards like that, It makes sense that they would bring back Swashbuckler, who's kind of one of the OG cards for that, and that they would update it to not be trash anymore. Coldblood, another card I would have liked to see rotated and unnerfed, but here it is. Patient Assassin is returning with 1 more health. I don't imagine that 1 more health on Patient Assassin is enough to make it see play, but you can't like whirlwind it anymore. So if that was a factor, then that factor is gone. Vanessa VanCleef is an interesting new rogue legendary. 2 mana 2/3 combo, add a copy of the last card your opponent played to your hand. So this will be interesting both as the rogue player, but also playing against rogue when they're likely to have this card, you know? So you're not going to want to end your turn with a card that will devastate you if your opponent gets a hold of it. I really like it. I think it's going to be neat. We'll see how it gets used. Odd Rogue and Kingsbane are kind of the rogue decks in Wild right now, but I imagine Galakron's going to get unnerfed, and while I don't see the other 2 decks running, certainly not Odd Rogue, running this card, I could see like a Reno or a Galakron rogue making use of this, so that'll be sweet. Plague Scientist returning. This card's cool. It doesn't have Wild Pyromancer anymore, so I don't know how this is going to get used. Maybe with, like, on 7, you could play that new Frenzy card that, like, when it takes damage, deals 1 damage to all of your opponents' minions or whatever. You could play that as a turn 7 combo, but, like, you're probably just going to play that with Nitro Boost on 5. Although, being that Nitro Boost is so good, maybe that card makes the cut in Rogue anyway. So since you're running it in your deck as it is, you include this to also work with it. Adding a bad card that doesn't work on its own to interact with the card you're only including because it interacts with a card that you would run anyway seems a little unlikely to me. If there are like a lot of ways for Rogue, like Explosive Sheep's coming back too, like you could go sheep in this and broom the sheep into something to clear the board. I don't know. If there's a Rogue deck in Standard that values this could see play there. SI Agent is sticking around. Assassin's Blade is getting one of the biggest reworks in the set, I think. Its mana is 1 less. Its attack is 1 lower, but its durability is 1 higher. And I think that the biggest benefit of Self-Sharpening Sword is the fact that it has 4 durability. So if you play Self-Sharpening Sword and then play Deadly Poison on your Self-Sharpening Sword, that Deadly Poison dealt 8 damage. So that type of deck is seeing play in Standard right now. Maybe 5 durability Assassin's Blade is good enough to see play in Standard. I can't imagine it sees play in Wild. Not with Kingsbane there. Assassinate is getting a buff, so it's now a strictly better Walk the Plank, which is interesting. I don't know that this is better enough than Walk the Plank to see play, but maybe a slow rogue could use it. Maybe a Reno rogue in Wild could use it, but even then I think they would have just run Walk the Plank before. Tomb Pillager coming back, pretty cool. For some reason, Auctioneer is going to remain in the core set, and I imagine that's why this card is coming back. Sprint is coming back with 1 less mana. People have been saying, Rogue has 1 mana, draw 4 cards. Why would they play 6 mana, draw 4 cards? Rogue doesn't have 1 mana, draw 4 cards. It has 1 mana, do a lot. Like, Secret Passage does not read draw 4 cards, and that would be much better than Secret Passage is right now. But Rogue, regardless of your stance on Secret Passage, Rogue currently has a lot of really cheap access to a lot of cards. So I also don't think that Sprint makes the cut right now. The fact that this costs 6 means that you can now prep Sprint on 4 again, which is kind of cool. Maybe a Highlander Rogue could run this, but even then, Galakron's probably getting unnerfed, and Galakron kind of does this better even at 1 more mana, so I imagine Sprint will see as much play now as it does currently. On to Shaman, Lightning Bolt, coming back as a nature spell. Novice Sapper, 1 mana 3/2, spell damage +1, overload 1. This card is pretty solid for a 1-drop, right? Like 1 mana 3/2, good. Spell damage +1, great. And overload 1, in Wild, that's kind of a benefit some of the time. So you can go Tunnel Trog, Coin, Zapper, and have a 2/3 and a 3/2 on 1. Odd Shaman is losing its spell damage totem, probably to enable cards like this to be printed. Odd Shaman probably would have played this card, but Odd Shaman will not exist anymore because it was built around the spell damage totem, which it no longer has. So we'll see how much play this gets. It's going to be an overload aggro Shaman, if it does see play in Wild. Menacing Nimbus, returning from Wild. Rockbiter Weapon, returning as a nature spell. This is another card that I would have liked to see rotated and unnerfed, but it remains. Windfury, now a nature spell. Feral Spirit returning and only overloading 1. That's pretty significant. You lose less of your following turn after you play this card. I think it'll see play if overload matters, and it might not see play if not. Lightning Storm, I love this change. This is one of my favorite changes in the whole set because the variance on deal 2 or deal 3 was pretty heartbreaking for one player every time. You know, like you either feel robbed if it doesn't deal 3 to the right minions, or as the opponent you feel robbed if it does deal 3 to the right minions. So I like the change to this card, and actually I think it's pretty solid now. 3 mana, deal 3 damage to the board is pretty good. So a slow Shaman deck that wants a cheap board clear can run this without risking getting absolutely decimated by the variance on this card. Also, it's buffed to Zephrys. Monotide Totem, sticking around. Unbound Elemental, sticking around. Draenel Totemcarver. This card saw play an even Shaman with 4 health, so I'm sure it makes the cut with 5 now. I don't know that 1 more health on Totemcarver is enough to make even Shaman relevant again in Wild, but it might be getting Flametongue Totem back soon, so we'll see if Flametongue Totem even Shaman appreciates this +1 health Draenei Totemcarver. Alright, so Hex. Hex is sticking around. This is an interesting decision to me. When they nerfed this card, it was because it wasn't getting played in anything. They nerfed it for philosophical reasons. They were like, we don't think that single target removal this efficient is a Shaman design space thing, and it's just random. So we want to make it bad so it doesn't see play. Like, why wouldn't you rotate and maybe unnerf this card? Since you're reworking the basic and classic set anyway. Maybe their stance on Hex has changed, but it just seems strange that this card stuck around, especially since Polymorph rotated. You know, like, Mage is losing Polymorph, and Transforming is a lot more Mage flavor than it is Shaman flavor. Unless you count Evolve effects, but maybe that's why they've come around on it. Tidal Surge, 4 mana, deal 4 damage to a minion, lifesteal. So this used to be deal 4, heal 4. Now it is deal 4 lifesteal. Slight buff, it matters with like spell damage and stuff. I don't know that Shaman wants a card this slow even with that buff, but it's cool that they're buffing cards that see no play. Doomhammer sticking around. Earth Elemental coming back with 1 less overload. This is very slightly better. I don't know that that's enough to make this card playable, but it's no longer, you know, bad value for the mana, right? Like, you wouldn't pay 8 mana for a 7/8 taunt, but 7 mana for a 7/8 taunt is, you know, good stats or cost, whatever. And the overload lets you play this early at the cost of having a reduced mana turn the following turn. So maybe this is enough to make this card matter. I can't imagine that it does, but we'll see. You know, 5 mana, 7/8 taunt, pretty good. Fire Elemental is coming back, now dealing 4 damage instead of 3. I don't know that that's enough to make this card see play again, but maybe in Standard. You know, deal 4 is significant compared to deal 3. Alakir coming back with 1 more health. Was the 5 health keeping Alakir from being relevant? I don't think so, but it's really... my favorite part about this card is that it still says charge on it. A lot of the charge cards of this set have lost charge in favor of rush, and it's cool that at least this one keeps charge. It's nice that an underperforming card is now getting a slight buff, even if it won't matter. On to Warlock, Ritual of Doom. 0 mana, destroy a friendly minion. If you have 5 or more, summon a 5/5 demon shadow spell. So like you play Fiendish Rites, you get your 4 imps, and if you have a 5th minion already on the board, you get to play this for 0 and turn one of them into a 5/5 effectively. Nerubian Egg is coming back from Wild, so that's going to matter for this. I think this card will see play. It's basically 0 mana 5/5. It's probably more of a 0 mana 4/4 or something like that, depending. But I think this will see play, at least in Standard. But like a Zoo deck appreciates this, and the Galakrond stuff rotating to Wild is probably getting unnerved. And that whole deck is about going wide, right? So maybe this card sees some play. Flame Imp returning. Mortal Coil returning, now a Shadow Spell. Possessed Villager coming back to Standard. Drain Soul, now a Shadow Spell, and it deals 3 instead of dealing 2. So Warlock has access to Penance. Any Warlock deck that wants removal will consider this card now. Reno Lock especially wants to remove for cheap, and it wants to heal, so slots right in probably. This card's solid. Penance is good. This card's good. And if you think about it, you know, Dark Bomb used to see play up until like recently, you know, like in the past year-ish. So if Dark Bomb's good enough as removal, then this card's good enough as removal for sure. Tiny Knight of Evil is returning from Wild. They're going to lean into the discard synergy for Warlock, it seems. Void Terror coming back with 1 more health. This card was really cool for me back in the day. I used to love the version of Zoolock that had like the egg and the power overwhelming. So you would like trade up with something using your power overwhelming and then use the Void Terror to eat that minion and preserve the stats. So Standard is getting Nerubian Egg back, but it lost power overwhelming a long time ago. So I don't know that the 1 more health is enough to make this card relevant again, but it's really cool that they're trying. Fiendish Circle is coming back to Standard as a Fel spell. It might see play with the 0 mana card, but I imagine it's still too slow. Hellfire coming back as a fire spell. Lakari Fellhound coming back to Standard, slightly adjusted. This used to read Battlecry, discard 2 cards. Now it's Battlecry, discard your 2 lowest cost cards. You may think that that's a buff, and you may be right. The nice part about it is, like, with Wicked Whispers, it's hard to guarantee you discard your Boneweb Egg because decks like that want to run so many 1-cost cards. But with Lakari Fellhound, you not only discard your lowest cost card, you also discard your 2nd lowest cost card. You only have to get yourself down to 1 card that costs less than Boneweb Egg instead of 2 cards that cost less than Boneweb Egg. It also never discards your Doomguard, which is really nice for Wild. But the thing is, this also never discards your Hand of Gul'dan, which is pretty important. So like this will almost never high roll your Hand of Gul'dan. You'll have to be down to like 3 cards, and then your other card will have to be Hand of Gul'dan, you know, or the Ebb and Lock if you've drawn your prime already. Still, like, I imagine people are at least going to experiment with this card more, and maybe it's enough to make Boneweb Egg the de facto disco list instead of the Dark Lair version. Fellsoul Jailer, 5 mana 4/6, Battlecry, your opponent discards a minion, Death Rattle, return it. This is the type of hand disruption card that I actually really like. I'm lumping it in there with Glide and Star Student Stelina. I think the Dirty Rat type of hand disruption, and especially a Lucia type of hand disruption, is pretty yucky. It just kind of like cancels out your opponent's whole deck in one fell swoop, you know, like just by throwing in that anti-combo card. And this doesn't automatically win. It like delays their combo and allows you to put yourself in a position to win, you know, kind of like Glide and Star Student Stelina would. As with those cards, I think this card is overcosted for the effect. You're certainly not going to run this in like a controlling deck to buy you some time. And its stats aren't that great for the cost, but it maybe denies your opponent their good tempo play for the next turn, so maybe a tempo-y deck would run this. We'll have to see. We haven't really seen an effect like this before. I don't think that we're going to see a Dirty Rat with extra steps type of strategy with this guy. You know, you're not going to run this guy with Ironbeak Owl and destroy your opponent's combo card and then silence him so that they can't get it back. I don't think that that's going to happen on purpose. But this is a really cool card, and I like that they're exploring more space like this. Siphon Soul is coming back with 1 less mana and as a shadow spell. I don't know that this is good enough to make the cut in Renal Lock and Wild, just because in Wild right now things are so fast that they go wide and are pretty small unless they're a giant. And the giants that get played come with a bunch of little tiny minions alongside them. So spending your whole turn to destroy 1 giant and heal 3 is probably just too slow, even at 5 mana, you know. But it's cool, again, that they're buffing underperforming cards. I could see this seeing play in Standard easily. Dread Infernal remains unchanged. Enslaved Fell Lord, 7 mana 4/10 taunt, also damages the minions next to whomever this attacks. So, this demon is large body and taunt, and Renal Lock cares about large body demons with taunt. This doesn't have a death rattle, like Enhanced Dreadlord gives you a 5/5 with lifesteal, and Voidlord gives you a bunch of additional taunts once it dies. This doesn't give you anything when it dies, but if you cheat this off of a Void Caller, not only have you made a barrier for your opponent, but if they develop anything and they can't kill it, you just clean up their whole board with 1 attack. I feel like this could fit into a Renal Lock build. I don't know that it will. The other thing is, like, if you don't have Godfrey in the Ticketus version, you have to wait till Enhanced Dreadlord to play a card. So this gives you an additional 7 mana thing to activate your Ticketus at the earliest possible time. And it gives you another demon that's worth including in your deck to decrease the chance that your Void Caller will pull your Ticketus. So I don't know. I feel like this card could see play in Renal Lock or Cube Lock or something like that. Twisting Nether returning. So, Lord Jaraxxus is a hero card now, which is really pog if you like Jaraxxus like I do. I'm excited for this change, all right? You may hear some hesitance in my voice, and that's because, like Tracking, I feel like what was unique about this card is destroyed. So while this change is really good for the card as far as making it see play, it has made it a more boring card. This isn't them designing a card to alter your hero through a minion anymore. You know, like this card, the minion version of this card came out long before hero cards did. And it was interesting to have a minion become your hero. And it was a nice way to add the like master heroes, which is what they were called in the WoW TCG, to Hearthstone without having to create another card. I think they could have preserved what was unique about Jaraxxus by making him an 8-cost card and making him set your health to 15 in the way that Alexstrasza does, so that you could heal out of it later, making it more playable without making it just another hero card. That said, not only is this going to be a hero card, a good hero card, but it's also going to be the only hero card in Standard for at least a set. So I imagine this card will see a ton of play in Standard. On top of that, this card is probably good enough to just slot into Renal Lock and Wild. A lot of the time, 2 mana make a 6/6 is better than 2 mana deal 3 heal 3. And 2 mana deal 3 heal 3 is very good. So you can play Gul'dan, get your demon value, heal as much as you need to, and then instead of having to run an expired merchant to get additional N'Zoths or Gul'dans for additional threats later on, you can run Lord Jaraxxus and have unlimited threats just by pressing the button. I feel like this card is good enough to see play. You may be saying, like, you're not going to run this and Gul'dan, but, like, Hunter has 2 good heroes. You know, like, Hunter decks will run Zul'jin and they run Rexxar. And no other class has really had 2 good heroes yet. So Warlock will now have 2 good heroes, and I imagine it will run both of them. On to Warrior, Bloodsail, Deckhand, 1 mana 2/1 Pirate. Battlecry, the next weapon you play, costs 1 less. So you may be thinking, this is going to go really well in Pirate Warrior, and you may be right. But the thing about Pirate Warrior these days is N'Zoth's First Mate is one of your weapons, and Sword Eater is one of your weapons, and then you have Ankar. And even then, it can be really awkward with all the upgrading that you do in that deck to play your minions out, because you can't play Sword Eater when you've, like, invested twice into your Ankar, and that weapon's really big and drawing you pirates. You know, you're just sitting there with a Sword Eater in hand that you can't play without destroying your own weapon. So adding more weapons to the mix is really weird. I don't imagine that this card makes the cut without changing how that deck works. And I don't think you can cut N'Zoth's First Mate or Sword Eater. So I think the card to cut is actually Upgrade. Like, lean less heavily into making your weapon bigger and last longer, and instead run some additional weapons. You can kind of build your own N'Zoth's First Mate by running this alongside Cursed Blade, or you could put Livewire Lance back in the deck again, and between that and Ankar, you're playing Bloodsail Deckhand into a 2 mana weapon a lot of the time, which might be good. So I do think that there could be room in Pirate Warrior for this card, but I think the deck has to change around a little bit as well to accommodate. Shield Slam returning, Whirlwind returning, Armor Smith returning, Cruel Taskmaster returning, Execute returning. This is another one that I would have liked to see rotated and unnerfed, but here it is. Slam returning, Fiery War Axe. The ultimate card to rotate and unnerf remains Sag. Frothing Berserker returning. War Cache, 3 mana, add a random warrior minion, spell, and weapon to your hand. Hunter has pretty much this exact same card, and it's going to depend on the pool. Like, if there are pretty good minions, spells, and weapons in the pool for this, then this card might see play. But if there aren't, then it won't. Warsong Commander, not getting unnerfed, but getting changed in an interesting way. Most of the time, this is an expensive broomstick, but broomstick does not work with patron. So when you play patron and then you play broom to give it rush, it trades into something, and then the new patron does not have rush. With Warsong Commander, you can play it and then play patron, trade with your patron so that it makes another patron, and then trade again with that patron. So if you want Grim Patron to be a powerful deck again, this isn't going to quite do it. But if you just wanted to have those turns again, where you play Warsong Commander and Grim Patron and make a bunch of patrons, this will do it. So that's cool. Warsong Outrider, 4 mana 5/4 Rush. This card is probably mediocre. If Rush matters enough, I could see this thing play, depending on what that Rush matters is. But it's not better than, like, the Mummy, right? That got to trade into 2 things and did 1 more damage than this if it was just going to trade straight up. But yeah, it's an alright card for a core set. Brawl returning. Shield Maiden returning. I'm excited because I like Shield Maiden. This gives me, like, old school Control Warrior vibes. I would have liked to see this buffed by a mana or something. It's probably not good enough to see play even in Standard these days, but it's cool that they're bringing it back. Gorehowl returning. Grommash Hellscream returning. On to the neutrals. Murloc Tinyfin is returning from Wild. If you like Tinyfin, that'll be Pog for you. Abusive Sergeant, another card I would have liked to see rotated and unnerfed, but here it is. Arcane Anomaly. So, I've been playing an Odd Demon Hunter in Wild. Odd Demon Hunter in Wild is basically like 23 one-costs and then a few payoff cards that usually cost 3. And a lot of those one-cost cards end up being spells, especially like Twin Slice and stuff like that. The payoff for that, for the most part, is Penflinger, but you run so many anyway that I've just been playing this card. And it's really easy to turn this into a 1-mana 2/3 or a 1-mana 2/4 even without going out of your way to do it. So a lot of those one-cost spells that are seeing play in Wild see play in Standard, just in standard Demon Hunter decks. So having this card in Standard might be cool for Demon Hunter. We'll see if it sees some play. It never used to. It was kind of like a worse monoworm. But, you know, a 1-mana 2/3 is a good card. And it's not hard to turn this into a 1-mana 2/3 in Demon Hunter. Argent Squire returning. Cogmaster coming back to Standard. This is interesting. They're bringing back Annoyatron too. There's not going to be Mech Warper, right? So, like, I don't know how much play this will see, but they've brought back a lot of the Mech Matter stuff in the core set. So, depending on what they're planning to do for the next year, I could see this going into a Mech deck. Elven Archer returning. Murloc Tidecaller returning. So, Stone Tusk Boar coming back to Standard. Not as a 1/1 charge, but as a 2/1 rush. A 1/1 charge minion is a different card than a 2/1 rush minion. So you gotta wonder, why did they ruin Boar OTK, Fun Dire Frenzy shenanigans, and APM Priest to print a forgettable, probably won't see any play card? For 1 less attack, not only do you get to get rush off of a 1-mana minion, but you get to give rush to everything you have on the board. Like, nothing needs this card, but like there were so many fun meme decks in Wild that like people were attached to. And like it'd be one thing if this was a problematic card, but it wasn't, you know, like everyone playing Quest Rogue needs this card, especially now that Deckhand isn't played in that deck. So Quest Rogue in Wild right now is you only play Flybooter and you play Captain's Parrot to tutor your Flybooter, because Flybooter is so good at completing the quest on its own. So you don't run any other pirates, so that Captain's Parrot always finds it. So this was your 1-mana charging minion. I don't understand why they didn't just give this a new picture and a new name. Because they were giving other cards new pictures and new names, and, you know, like, this is a different card than Stone Tusk Boar was before. It just doesn't make any sense. I don't get it. You know, like, who's happy about this? I don't know. This is going to see no play. I don't know. Voodoo Doctor. Workin Infiltrator returning. Young Priestess returning. This card will see play in Classic mode because it was in the Zoo decks of its time. Acidic Swamp Ooze, the de facto weapon removal, is returning. Annoyatron coming back to Standard. So in Wild, a good way to beat Kingsbane Rogue is to have cheap Divine Shield taunts in your deck. I imagine that's also pretty good against Weapon Rogue in Standard, so maybe this card sees play as a rogue tech. Bloodmage Thalnos is coming back in the core set, and this is a card I think should have been rotated a while ago for the same reason that Azure Drake was rotated. Azure Drake was rotated just because it was so reasonable for what it did that anything similar wasn't getting played. And so having that type of thing just around in the core set prevents you from running other like similarly costed spell damage minions, because even though they might have slightly better stats or Divine Shield or something like that, this one draws you a card, and things replacing themselves is really effective. But it's back. You know, enjoy it in Standard for even another year. Bloodsail Raider returning. Bluegill Warrior. So, not only did they ruin this card just like they ruined Stone Tuskboar when they could have just printed a new Murloc with a new name and a new picture, but this card mattered. This card actually nerfed the deck, you know? Like, having this card go from charge to rush destroys the Anyfin OTK deck. And, like, that's a deck that people played and people liked. Why? 2 mana 3/1 rush isn't going to get played. Why? Especially when, like, 2 mana 1/4 rush Windfury exists, you know? You can play that. There are so many ways to just buff its attack easily in most classes that would play a card like this. Like, why there was no reason. There's no reason to make this. There's no reason to change this card. I get that, like, we want to, like, make charge more niche, you know, like, put it on cards like legendaries that have very specific or late game uses, but just rotate it, you know, like, make a new filler 2 mana 3/1 rush Murloc. It doesn't have to be Bluegill Warrior. I'm baffled, you know, like, I don't get it. All right. Craze Alchemist is returning, and it doesn't have its target anymore. You know, like, Craze Alchemist was a Doomsayer assassin, and now it's just there. Dire Wolf returning. Explosive Sheep coming back to standard. I think that this is kind of filling Doomsayer's shoes as, like, the early neutral board clear. It's interesting. This alongside Broom has been played in Wild for things that otherwise don't have access to cheap board clears, so I imagine we're going to see a lot of that in standard. But this is cool. This is like a basic enough effect that I think it's cool to have it in the core set. Fogsail Freebooter, 2 mana 2/2 pirate. If you have a weapon equipped, deal 2 damage. This is another card that I think at first seems like it's going to be nutty in Pirate Warrior and, like, Kingsbane Rogue. But, like, Kingsbane Rogue has a lot easier ways to deal more damage than this. And Pirate Warrior already has a 2-drop that requires you to have a weapon the turn prior, you know? So, like, Nazas First Mate on 1, then Sharkfin Fan on 2, so that you get, in addition to a 2/2, also a 1/1. I want to guess that if this sees play, it'll probably be in Pirate Warrior. 2 mana deal 2 is pretty good. You can compare this to Mercspark Eel, right? Like, Mercspark Eel is 2 mana 2/3, deal 2. But, like, when you play Mercspark Eel, the condition is always met. Whereas when you play this card, the condition is sometimes met. I don't know. I'm not saying that this isn't going to be good, but it doesn't seem that broken to me now that I've had some chance to percolate. Kobold Geomancer returning. Loot Hoarder returning. Mad Bomber returning. I don't get this one. Like, this isn't interesting for Constructed. Nobody's going to elect to put this in their deck unless they're, like, super memeing, and that got old 6 years ago, you know? This is such a forgettable card. It's, like, arena relevant, and just put it in arena then? I don't know why this card made it to the core set, but it did. Murloc Tidehunter. This is a card you could have changed to be a 3/1 rush. Nerubian Egg coming back from Wild. This card saw a lot of play when it was in Standard. It hasn't seen too much since it rotated. I imagine it's good enough to see some play. Especially considering that the 2 mana 0/3 saw play in Warrior, and that's probably a worse card than this in most cases. But yeah, especially with that 0 mana Warlock card that destroys one of your own minions, it'll be good to, like, play this on 2, and then on turn 3 you could, like, coin Fiendish Ritual and nuke this thing with your 0 mana card and get a 4/4 and a 5/5 and have your 1/1s. I don't know if it's going to play out exactly like that, but any deck that runs Nerubian, any Warlock deck that runs Nerubian Egg probably runs the 0 mana Ritual card and vice versa. River Croc coming back. Sunreaver Spy. So, Avenge is coming back, and it got that new kind of better Vaporize spell for Paladin, and Oh My Og exists. So, like, Paladin's got some pretty good secrets now, and this is a Paladin secret card. I know it says neutral, but with a card like this, you want to curve into it, you know? Like, you don't want to play it on turn 4 alongside a Hunter spell, you know? Like, on turn 4, all right, I have a 3/4 and a secret. Who cares? But, like, playing a Paladin secret on 1 and then playing Sunreaver Spy to make up for some of the tempo you lost by playing a secret instead of a minion ought to be pretty good. I could see, now that there are some slightly better secrets in Standard, I could see Sunreaver Spy maybe seeing some play. So it's cool that it's coming back again in the core set. Toxicologist returning from Wild. I don't know how much play this will see. It didn't see play last time, and I imagine it won't this time. Youthful Brewmaster sticking around. Brightwing sticking around. Cold Light Seer sticking around unchanged. Earthen Ring Farseer sticking around. Flesh-Eating Ghoul is coming back with one more attack. This card's identity is to have lots of attack, right? Like, it didn't need one more attack. What it needed is more health. So if you'd added a health to this, I could see it seeing play, but we added an attack to it, so probably we'll see about as much play as it already does. Humongous Razorleaf coming back. Again, I'm sad that, like, with this card coming back to Standard, that Ancient Watcher didn't remain in the core set to make Silence Priest have a strong, core to it. But I imagine, given the card they added to Priest and this card returning, that we're going to see some Silence Priest support at some point in the next year. Ice Rager is slightly better than Magma Rager and replacing it in the core set. It'll see as much play as Magma Rager does. Injured Blade Master returning. Ironbeak Owl returning. Jungle Panther returning. So, King Mukla, for the most part, they did a good job of taking all of the bleh legendaries out of the core set and moving them to Wild. It was such a bummer for, like, especially free-to-play players and just players in general. When you open a pack and you see that golden flash go off, you're like, legendary, I get something cool. And then you get a 0/4 that, like, might draw you a card sometimes, or, like, prevents you from casting your own spells, or like Millhouse Monostorm, like stupid stuff like that. It's cool that the main pack that you get from, like, Tavern Balls and stuff isn't going to be a pack that eternally has Garbo legendaries in it, but one of them remains. King Mukla is unplayably bad, and I am surprised to see him back unchanged. When we were looking at these in chat the other day, somebody tricked me into thinking that this card had Rush on it. I was like, oh, did I miss it? Did it get Rush? And it didn't. And I was thinking, like, during that brief moment when I thought it had Rush, is like, is that even good enough? The card still gives your opponent 2 bananas. Why didn't this card get an update if they're bringing it back? And since it's not getting an update, why didn't it rotate? There's the Banana Vendor, there's Shenanigans, and there's King Mukla. So, like, I wonder if there's a your opponent has bananas theme around in the future. For Rogue, maybe? I don't know. I imagine not, but, like, that would be the only excuse I could think of to have this card remain around. Lone Champion, solid card. Again, Divine Shield Taunt is really good against Rogue, so I could see the right deck running this as a Rogue tech. Mini Mage coming back from Wild, costing 1 less and dealing 1 less damage. I don't think that 1 less mana cost is enough to make up for this being 3 mana and only having 1 health and dying to Whirlwind, but we'll see. Raid Leader. Again, like, I found out about this buff before I found out about the Warhorse Trainer buff, and I was like, oh, Does odd paladin value giving bonus attack to its tour guides and its righteous protectors more than it values the 1 extra health on the initial body? And it would have been interesting to see, but now Warhorse Trainer also has an additional attack, so it still outclasses this card by a mile. South Sea Captain returning. Spider Tank coming back. Stoneskin Basilisk coming back. The forgettable card. Baron Rivendare coming back from Wild. This is really interesting. Hunter recently had access to what was essentially the same card as this, and it saw a little bit of play. I could see like the right priest deck valuing this. I don't know. This is the type of card that I think just requires the meta to be a certain amount of slow and to have the right death rattles to use. And we could see Baron Rivendare make some waves in Standard. Big Game Hunter used to be 3 mana, then it was nerfed to 5, and now it's going to be 4. I don't know that a 3-mana version of this card would even see that much play today in Standard, but it's cool that they're taking underperforming cards and making them a little bit better. I'm excited to have a chance to play with this card again. I don't know. I don't think it'll be good enough, but I like that I get to try. Chillwind Yeti. I've heard some people complain that this card didn't get buffed. This card saw play because Azure Drake was good, and playing this on 4 into your opponent's Azure Drake was pretty good. And because the card pool was so limited. You know, like this card getting power crept by minions just kind of being 4 mana 4/5s plus a bonus is fine. You know, like this is a card that exists so that you start the game with something to play, and then you build off of your collection with cards that actually have effects in addition to good stats for cost. I think that this card is fine to remain in the core set, and it's fine that it's filler, and it's fine. Dark Iron Dwarf remains. Defender of Argus gets +1 attack, especially now that Sunfury Protector is rotating to Wild. I could see this seeing more play in Standard. Is the +1 attack enough to make it relevant in like Evenlock or something? I don't know. I imagine not. Grim Necromancer, vanilla card. I could see why they'd add it to the core set. SI7 Infiltrator remains. Sen'jin Shieldmaster remains. Violet Teacher remains. Faceless Manipulator remains. Gurabashi Berserker has 1 more health now. I don't know how much that'll matter, but it's cool that they're buffing it. Overlord Runethok, new legendary minion. So hand buff Paladin in Wild right now runs a 5-mana card that buffs your hand by 2. This is a 5-mana card that buffs your hand by 1, but it has more stats than that other card initially, and it has Rush. So while it doesn't buff the rest of your hand by as much, it does have immediate and bigger impact on the board. I imagine this slots right in. I don't think it replaces Glowstone Technician, but I think if Glowstone Technician is good enough, this is also good enough. Stranglethorn Tiger remains. Talon Forging, 5-mana 3/3, Taunt, Divine Shield, Death Rattle, draw your highest cost minion. So not only does this draw your N'Zoth for you, but it is something to be put into your N'Zoth. And in the world where you've already drawn your N'Zoth, it instead draws you your Hadronox. I think that this card's cool. I could see it getting played in like a meme Taunt Druid deck, or even maybe in a Reno Lock deck to draw like Gul'dan and N'Zoth with, and to be good for N'Zoth to resummon. What's cool about this compared to something like Blood Mage Thalnos is it doesn't draw you a card once you're in fatigue. So like N'Zoth decks don't run Thalnos because they don't want to like draw a bunch of cards by the time in the game that you would play N'Zoth against an opposing control deck. So it will only draw you cards while you have cards to draw, which is pretty nifty. Cairn Bloodhoof coming back with 1 more attack. I don't think a 6-mana 5/5 that makes a 5/5 when it dies is good enough to see play in Wild. Maybe in Standard, but it's nice that Cairn at least isn't a strictly worse version of a common card. You know, like the additional attack on this sets it apart a little bit from that dragon that has a similar effect. Gadget Sand Auctioneer, I don't understand why it's still in Standard. This is like a card that I think should have been rotated, you know, like maybe even in the first round of Hall of Fame. I don't know what else to say about it. Like, I wouldn't mind it like rotating to Wild and then getting unnerved or something like that, but it just feels weird to have this card stick around in Standard more. High Inquisitor Whitemane is getting a 1 mana buff. This might actually be enough. The thing is, though, with effects like this in Kel'Thuzad, it's not just that they were expensive, it's also that you have to trade off your minions, you know? It's not like summon all friendly minions that died during your opponent's last turn, which would be nutty. It's like you have to trade away all your stuff, and then you can get that stuff back. So it can be a little bit of tempo recovery in a tempo deck that is forced to trade into the board for a turn. But it's kind of like, if you have enough stuff that High Inquisitor Whitemane was worth playing, you were probably winning already. So I don't know that the 1 mana buff is enough to make this card see play, but it's cool that they're buffing a card that was seeing no play. Baron Geddon getting 2 more health. Yeah, it doesn't go down as easy for 7 mana. That's pretty good. I could see the right deck wanting to play this now that it has more health. Baron's Stable Hand. Bleh. Nozdormu the Eternal. So, I do not like the other Nozdormu. The problem with the other Nozdormu is that, like, if you discover a random dragon, and your opponent, like, looked away from the game to talk to their friend, or is, like, playing Hearthstone while they watch television, doesn't have 100% of their focus on the game, and knows that they can tune out for a little bit at the end of their turn, or, like, you know, went to use the bathroom really quick, you know, you discover your Nozdormu and you play it, and you just kind of scam to win by breaking the 4th wall, you know, like the rope, the history bar, the battlefield, transfer student, shouldn't be something that a card interacts with, you know, like that should all just be 4th wall stuff. So reducing the time of a turn, forcing that on your opponent, I think is really bad for the game. And even though the card isn't competitive, I think that the original Nozdormu should just be changed. You know, like, I don't think that that's a good card to have in Hearthstone. However, this Nozdormu is awesome. This is like the coolest meme card that they've ever created, I think. I'm stoked on this thing. Do you know why I'm stoked on this thing? I'm stoked on this card because you have to elect to meme with it. You know, like, your opponent can't do this to you. You bring it upon yourself. A 7 mana 8/8 dragon with no text is not good enough to make it into your 30 cards. But if you are just out there to have fun and you want to find out right at the start of the game, is your opponent the type of player that you are, now you get to do it. You put the Nozdormu in your deck, and you get to find out whoever on ladder is a memer just like you right at the beginning of the game. And I think that's really cool. Like, this is a really fun idea. It's also cool that it enables, like, speed Hearthstone tournaments. So, like, we're going to see a lot of like small tournaments pop up that are just like, you have to put Nozdormu the Eternal in your deck for this tournament. And I think that's really neat. I'm going to try to come up with a channel point idea that involves this card. We'll see if I come up with something cool or something stupid, but I'm stoked on this thing, and I'm not usually stoked for meme cards like this. Stormwatcher coming back to Standard will probably see about as much play as it currently does in Standard. Stormwind Champion, 7 mana, 7/7 now, as opposed to a 6/6. Slight buff, probably won't matter too much, but it's cool. Arcane Devourer has more health now. So whenever you cast a spell, gain +2/+2. So imagine you have 0 cost spells, right? You have a couple of them. You play this on 8, you play your couple of 0-cost spells. Now this is an 8 mana, 8/12. So your opponent plays Shadow or Death and this dies. You know, like, this doesn't have Taunt, it doesn't have Rush, it doesn't have anything. It's just kind of like a really late game card that, if you can stick it for a turn, will kill your opponent the next turn when you go off with Gadgetzan Auctioneer. I don't think it's going to be better. Alexstrasza the Lifebinder. Keeping in the spirit of the original Alexstrasza, it's 9 mana, 8/8. You can either damage your opponent or heal yourself in a pinch. This card does something that the other one doesn't. You know, like Alexstrasza, the other Alexstrasza was a finisher or it was a pinch recovery card. This one is both of those things, but it's also a tempo card. So you can like play this and remove an opponent's big minion because this targets minions. Or you can like heal a friendly minion that was about to die and keep it around on the board longer. This card is really good. I'm looking forward to playing it in LPG. I imagine for 1 mana, this is pretty good alongside Bran and Potion of Illusion. So we'll see how that goes. Malygos the Spellweaver. So 9 mana, 4/12, draw spells until your hand is full. A lot of people were thinking that this card replaces Malygos, the original one with the spell damage. But that one is rotating to Wild, and this is a new Malygos. So if you were attached to the old Malygos, you can still play it in Wild. This is new. 9 mana, 4/12, draw spells until your hand is full is interesting. If there's anything I've learned from Wild, it's that one card gets your whole combo is good. So Polkelt, you play that, and then you draw all of your Anduin Raza stuff in the next couple of draws. Good. Psychomelon, you draw a couple of your combo pieces in Geppetto. Geppetto draws you the other two. Good. This could be like, I don't think that this example will be it, but something like it, where like most of your deck is just minions, and then you run 2 Frostbolts and 2 Ice Lance. Malygos draws you your whole combo. Something like that, you know, like you could use Malygos to be 1 card, draw your whole combo, if your whole combo is spells. Also, you can just play this in Druid. Jade Druid is already in kind of a position to where it appreciates dragons. So it likes Breath of Dreams. It likes the Ysera that makes portals. This will draw you portals. And if you're at the stage of the game where you've shuffled a bunch of idols into your deck, this will draw you a bunch of idols and you can make a bunch of Jades. I think this card's going to be solid in Wild if dragons matter and if you can put your deck in a position to where it needs to draw a bunch of spells. People are talking about double Malygos combo, and maybe that's a thing, but we'll see. Onyxia, 9 mana, 8/8. At the end of your turn, fill your board with 1/1 whelps. This is better than the original Onyxia, but it is about as playable as the original Onyxia. So the biggest threat when you play 9 mana for Onyxia originally was the 8/8 portion of it. You kill that, and you only have to deal with a bunch of whelps. This one leans even more heavily into the 8/8 portion of it because you can't leave that up and just remove the minions. You know, just remove the 1/1s. If you remove the 1/1s, not only does your opponent get them back at the end of your turn, but they will be able to attack because they happened at the end of your turn, not the beginning of your opponent's. It's still 9 mana for an 8/8 and a bunch of 1/1s, and your opponent will clear the Onyxia and not care about the 1/1s like they used to. Sleepy Dragon coming back. Ysera the Dreamer. 9 mana, 4/12, Battlecry, add 1 of each dream card to your hand. So when I saw this, I was really excited because I used to love the dream cards. I have a lot of love for original Ysera. And she kind of became obsolete over the years, and so we're not playing with the dream cards ever. And I just like it when newer cards tap into things that used to exist. So like, a new way to use dream cards is cool. This, however, nerfed the old Ysera. So the dream cards were nerfed for this one. Laughing Sister is buffed. Laughing Sister is now 2 mana. Used to be 3. But everything else, you know, like the dragon is the same, the Emerald Drake. But Nightmare and Ysera Awakens are both slightly worse, and Dream is completely changed. You know, like Dream used to be 0 mana, return a minion to its owner's hand. Now it's 1 mana, return an enemy minion to its owner's hand. You know, that just kind of takes all the fun out of it. You know, like, I'm not like, this isn't a new way to play with all those old cards. It's a new way to play with the tattered remains of those old cards, you know? So I'm not saying that they shouldn't have changed it. Like, they probably thought about it a lot and decided that that's what they had to do. Especially with Dream, that one, if they'd only changed that one, I wouldn't be complaining. But because if they'd left it as it was, you could play this on 9. If you wanted to, you could just Dream this back and then play it again later for infinite value in 1 card. So that one I would get. You know, like, I understand why they had to do that, but like, I don't know why they had to nerf a couple more of them. It bums me out. I'm not excited for this card like I used to be, but I don't necessarily fault them. They probably had a good reason. Plus, old Ysera wasn't seeing any play anyway, but they added the classic mode when Ysera was a giant value bomb and endgame, you know, finishing card. So if you were missing Ysera like I am, you now have a mode where you can play with her and she can be good. Deathwing the Destroyer, 10 mana 12/12, destroy all of their minions, discard a card for each destroyed. What's really cool about this is instead of like the old one where if you had a really large hand and you played this, you lose all of it. If you play this and you have a really large hand and you only destroy 3 or 4 minions, you get to keep most of your hand. If you play this into an empty board just because you need tempo, you don't lose the rest of your cards. This card's really cool. I don't know that a card this slow will see play, but it might, to be honest. Like, this is a lot better than the old Deathwing, and I think it's really cool. Clockwork Giant is coming back to be the new giant in Standard because Molten and Mountain are gone. On the one hand, I think this will see about as much play as Clockwork Giant used to when it was in Standard, but at the same time, since then they've decided that they want to have a lot of just random value generation, so decks aren't running out of cards like they used to. So maybe this card is more playable now that there's all this like random generation stuff that they keep printing. We'll see. Looking at the cards they added to the set, you get the feeling that mechs might matter in the next year. So if they matter, maybe this card will see even more play because of that. But I imagine not. All right, that was just about everything. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed the review, if you agreed or disagreed with any of my takes, or if you noticed anything that I didn't. Let me know like what cards you're most excited for from the core set, what new cards you're most excited for to play in Wild. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.